One of the most urgent tasks for our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Muppet Head Greta. It is Friday, and this is the best day of the week. Not just because the weekend is almost here, but because this is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show, episode number 211, if you're scoring at home. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm Executive Vice President of the Heartland Institute. We are an organization that has been around for 42 years, and we are known as the leading global think tank pushing back on climate alarmism. Heartland and this show bring you the data, the science, the truth that counters the climate alarmist narrative you've been fed every single day of your life. There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere, so I hope you will bring friends to view this live stream every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Also like, share, and subscribe, and be sure to leave your comments underneath this video. We do read them, and these all help convince YouTube's very mysterious algorithm to smile upon this program, and that gets it in front of even more people. And as a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media are not big fans of the way we cover climate and energy policy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to help the program, and I really hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. And you can help support it and bring it to the world every single week. And before we get started, we want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, What's Up With That, the CO2 Coalition, and our friends at Heartland UK Europe. Let's get started. We have a big and fun show for you today. We have with us, as usual, Anthony Watts, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute and publisher of the world's most viewed website on climate change, What's Up With That? Sterling Burnett, the Archbishop of Ranterbury, whose day job is the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center for Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. Linnea Lueken, Senior Fellow for Energy and Environment Policy at Heartland, and who is just a coincidence that her hair today looks exactly like Greta in the thumbnail. Muppet form. And I want to thank Silas Pearson, our fearless producer behind the scenes, helping to make sure the show looks and flows great. And joining us today, he's back on the show, is Jason Isaac. He is CEO and founder of the American Energy Institute, a former state representative in Texas. Jason is known worldwide as the Carbon King. Hey, Jason, how's that high carbon lifestyle cookbook coming along that we hint about all the time?
Well, I've just realized that I just when I thought it was ready to be finished, I had my top 10 most carbon intensive foods on the planet. I learned just this week, and I'm like, I've got to stop, because every week it seems like the media is something else that we're consuming is not good for the environment. And this week it's matcha tea. I don't even know if I've ever had matcha, but I saw some headlines about matcha being bad for the environment. I don't know where this special blend of tea is grown, but I'm going to have to import some and maybe include a sample of matcha tea with a cookbook. The design of the book itself is coming along. It's going to be an item that everyone will want because it's actually going to come with some things.
Hey, Jason, I have a question.
Good. Yes.
I see that in your little animated thing there, you've got a blue flame, which implies natural gas. But are you going to offer in your book ways to barbecue with coal?
You better believe it. And coal and wood. I mean, I've got a great pit at my house, right? I'm constantly smoking meat. Making sure that we put that carbon back in the environment so that we can grow more trees and more plants for the cows to consume, so that my beef is even better and more tender and imported. I try to buy American beef, but the carbon intensity is just not as high as Argentinian beef. imported into the United States, preferably shipped on a private jet. But sometimes it's a diesel powered ship, and that works okay too. I mean, another refrigerated container on that ship that's keeping the meat cool. I know it's living the high carbon lifestyle and helping me achieve that carbon intensity that I desire in my food.
Cool.
I never thought that I would be living the low carbon lifestyle compared to anybody. But since so much of my meat is hunted, even though I have to drive out to wherever I'm hunting at, still I'm told that the animals I take are low carbon, and the processing is pretty low carbon. So I should, maybe be the climate hero of the week, right? There should be I should get a gold star or some kind of award for lowering the carbon footprint of the earth with more meat.
Well done, Sterling. I kind of
recently
recently too. I ordered some beef from a company here in Texas. Their website, half a calf. I think it's halfacalf.com. And yes, you can order half a calf or a whole calf. I went through and selected certain meats that I wanted. Brisket, amazing steak. The cows are grown and raised in Stonewall, Texas, which interestingly enough is where LBJ used to reside. And there's still a ranch out there, and I think a presidential center that I've toured. But I went and had to drive to Johnson City. So that was the increasing the carbon intensity of me actually driving about an hour to go pick up the beef and then bring it back and smoke it and grill it. It's phenomenal. So that was my experience in I guess getting some local lower carbon beef. But it was absolutely incredible, and I'm kind of hooked now and supporting our local ranchers.
I would like to propose that people that follow this lifestyle be dubbed carbonites.
I love it. Oh, nice. Man.
All right. We should let Linnea weigh in, because she might have something to say about matcha. She wrote something about that recently, and I didn't know it was bad for the environment. I thought it was good for the environment, and that we were running out of it, according to recent stories.
Yeah, that's the story. One of the stories that was floating around this week was that global warming was going to end matcha, except in the very article that made that headline, they also said actually the people who are growing it aren't saying that it's going to end. They just have to slightly shift the growing season, or modify or breed crops that are a little bit more heat resistant, but you don't know if it will work. They really try to make sure that you stay worried, even as they present, reasonable solutions. But, tea, so matcha is just green tea, but it's grown in certain parts of Japan. I think the matcha part of it is the leaf selection, but also the processing. They grind it down to a powder when they use it. It is, I like it, but it is definitely an acquired taste, as all tea is kind of bitter. So, it's just the same old. It's true that hot weather can make tea more bitter. So if you have, really hot weather, then that will drive that. But the area of Japan that they're talking about that they grow it in isn't experiencing more high temperature heat waves. They're experiencing, like most parts of the world that have seen any warming at all, higher nighttime lows. So in the winter, it won't get quite as freezing at night. And you don't even know where exactly they're recording the temperature stations at. It could be, an urban center in that region. And then, of course, the rural areas surrounding it won't be quite so hot. And I think Japan has warmed, very little compared to other places even, just because it's surrounded by the ocean. But it's, such that any warming at all is 2 degrees over 150 years or whatever. So even then, it's all just fear mongering. But if matcha is also bad for the environment, I can imagine that they would only say as much because it ships from, all the way in Japan or China, or, they grow it in some parts of China as well, I believe. So
yeah, you missed the highlights. It's endangered, except that it's setting records every year for production. But it's disappearing. We're telling you, are you gonna believe the data? Or are you gonna believe what we're telling you? And they would say, well, yeah, it's growing, it's increasing. And they also ignore the fact that China is a major producer of matcha and production there has boomed. Why? Not because it's so much better to grow it in China, but because all of a sudden there's a lot of demand for matcha and Japan can't keep up. And China is more than willing to step in and fill the gap. So the story she responded to was pure bunk. And my suspicion is, unless tea itself is bad for the environment, matcha is not bad for the environment.
Cool. All right.
So the matcha in China is probably ground up with coal power. I wonder what it is in Japan, because I don't know. I don't want to have to import Chinese matcha because it's got a higher carbon intensity. So Japan might have to up their game and convince me that it's this fine ground powder is using diesel or something.
No, Jason, you got it all wrong. The matcha in China is ground up by child and slave labor by hand.
That's too low carbon for me. Can't do it.
Right. All right. Well, we got a lot to cover today. So let's stop talking about matcha tea and talk about other stuff here. But before we get into it, I just want to tell everybody that the Heartland Institute, we're a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and we have a benefit dinner gala every year. And this year, it's going to be on September 3rd, 2026 at the Palmer House in Chicago. And our featured keynote speaker is none other than America's greatest governor, Ron DeSantis. We are so excited to have him with us on our special night. And I hope that you could be there on this very special night, whether you would have to travel to Chicago, and especially if you're in the Chicagoland area. This is it's going to be a great night and a great way to support the Heartland Institute. So you can go to benefit.heartland.org, or you can just go right to our website, heartland.org. There's a link right there on the front page so you can get more information and get your tickets. We expect to sell out. So if you want to be there, I hope you will act very soon. All right, let's get on with our show. There's so much to cover today. And as we start, as we always do, with the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Silas. Thank you very much, unpaid assistant Bill Nye. Okay, we've covered this story quite a bit. We covered it when it first came out, and there is a new development, so we wanted to cover it again. I've titled this section, EPA Gold Bars Resurface. A lot of you will probably remember all this. Let's get to it. I'll read from the New York Times. The headline is, Appeals Court says EPA cannot block billions in climate grants. An appeals court on Tuesday this week handed a victory to a group of federal grant recipients that the Trump administration has prevented from spending billions of dollars in climate funding for over a year. In a split decision, 10 judges on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit upheld an earlier injunction that said the Environmental Protection Agency could not terminate $20 billion in climate grants, and that the recipients should have access to the funds as their case proceeds. If the EPA does not appeal a decision to the Supreme Court in the next 7 days, and that's running out, the judgment will effectively reinstate much of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, a Biden-era green bank initiative that supports low-cost loans and investments for renewable energy projects across the country. Last February, the EPA administrator, Lee Zeldin, attempted to claw back $20 billion in climate grant funding that the Biden administration had awarded to 8 nonprofit groups. Mr. Zeldin suggested the program was vulnerable to waste, fraud, and abuse, citing a hidden camera video released by the right-wing group, according to New York Times, Project Veritas, in which a former EPA staff member likened the outgoing administration's spending to throwing gold bars off the Titanic. The delay has taken a toll on the grant recipients, which relied on the funds for basic expenses like payroll and office rent. Not really helping the environment, but they're getting paid. Beth Bafford, the chief executive of the lead plaintiff Climate United, left the organization in March and was not replaced. Other groups have laid workers off. Power Forward Communities, which received $2 billion in grants, was down to just 2 employees earlier this year. Holy smokes. On Tuesday, the nonprofit plaintiffs celebrated the judgment. Representatives for Justice Climate Fund and the Coalition for Green Capital said they were looking forward to moving forward with their work. Now, as I mentioned before, we've covered this story from the start when Project Veritas released that video with the infamous throwing the gold bars off the Titanic clip. And let's play that again. It's a couple of minutes, and try not to let your blood boil.
Now we're just having to get the money out as fast as possible before they come in and like fuck up. It truly feels like we're on the Titanic and we're throwing like gold bars off the top edge.
Who are the gold bars going to?
Nonprofits, states, tribes. We gave them the money because it was harder. If it was a government-run program, they could take the money away. If Trump won, and because it was a external policy against Trump winning. Until the Trump people come in and tell us we can no longer give out money. I do environmental, climate, policy things.
Really?
Yeah.
It's amazing. Is that here? That stuff is here?
I mean, because I do like federal government climate things. Well, I have been doing that. But that might change. But
Why?
because it's tough. So look at the EPA. So a lot is going to change.
Amazing.
So I do, you know, the Inflation Reduction Act. Have you heard of it?
Yes.
Okay, Biden's climate law.
Yes.
Yeah. So I do IRA implementation. I work with like Biden appointees. The money that we've given out like tens of billions of dollars. Like over the last year, we've given out probably like $50 billion.
$50 million?
Billion with a B.
$50 billion.
Yes, for climate things. So like to go work for one of these places, I think would be really cool.
What are the places that you've given them to?
It's only been a few weeks, so it's a little early. But like green banks. So they're like nonprofit institutions that are like making it more financially feasible to build renewables, to do like climate projects. I do implementation now. So I do like how do you spend $100 billion? How do you make sure that like they're the proper, well, until recently, how do you make sure the proper like processes are in place to like prevent fraud and to prevent abuse and like ensure that like we are funding like good paying jobs and that sort of stuff. Now we're just having to get the money out as fast as possible before they come in and like fuck up.
Really?
Yeah.
You can do that?
To an extent, just like within reason.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
Why not? Because if it's not gonna...
Basically, that's where it all is now. I mean, now it all is like, it truly feels like we're on the Titanic and we're throwing like gold bars off the top edge.
Does it really?
Oh my God. So I got triggered again. I've seen that clip 100 times. Jason, I want to start with you. If a court or some judges can't prevent this obvious grift, the awarding of billions of our tax dollars to climate NGOs that do nothing to help the environment and have a revolving door between themselves and EPA staffers, as he mentioned in that little catfish episode right there, then what hope is there to root out any corruption in our government?
Yeah, it's very little, unfortunately. And the argument from the EPA is that this was overturned by the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, so that this money shouldn't be flowing to these nonprofits because of legislation that was passed by Congress reversing the decision. And so now you have groups like, remember Stacey Abrams, and she created this nonprofit that had received like $200, and then all of a sudden they get billions of dollars from the Biden administration as they're walking out the door. That was some of the gold bars. They had no infrastructure. They were supposed to go out and, convince people in urban areas to put rooftop solar on their homes and help their homes be more efficient to reduce their power bills. The cost benefit analysis is certainly there, and certainly not there in either of those cases, but they had no infrastructure in place for doing this. So it's not surprising. This is like a 6-10 ruling out of a DC circuit court, which again, that tells you everything you need to know. It's a DC circuit court. But you wonder, some of the work that we've done at the American Energy Institute is exposing organizations like the Environmental Law Institute and their Climate Judiciary Project to go around and taint judges at the state and local level. And then recently, they've been doing this since 2018, and recently they've been successful in tainting federal judges. And it's really hard to determine which judges have gone through their training, but we're seeing the funding come in from the CCP into some of these nonprofits to partner with these American-based nonprofits, even though there's a bunch of Beijing, Chinese-based employees, to go out and educate and taint judges around the country, state, local, and federal level. So it's not a surprise to see the ruling this way. I hope that the EPA gets their act together, their paperwork together, and appeals this decision. It is an egregious abuse of taxpayer dollars. It is incredibly inflationary. to the least among us more than anyone else. And this has just absolutely got to stop. So I hope there's some quick action on this front.
Look, it was a gift to politically connected climate elites, right? Stacey Abrams, 2 or 3 times loser in elections. She can't convince people to put her in office. And so she goes to the government and says, give me money. And this guy says, here's a couple of gold bars. Go forth and do with it what you want, because none of these places that receive the money had the institutional capacity to handle that kind of money. There were no accounting mechanisms in place for that type of that amount, that sudden infusion of resources. Some of them admitted, now that we have all this money, we're going to have to expand staff and get new office space. Well, that's certainly helping the climate. That's certainly going to people to retrofit their homes. If you're adding staff and getting new office space, and we need to have some office vehicles, and we'll make sure the most expensive green vehicles that we can buy. It is corruption in its purest form. And this guy admits it, and the courts say, the Biden administration sanctioned the corruption under the law, and so we're going to let it go forward, even though, as Jason said, it was rescinded. So, hopefully someone will put a check on it. I'd like to see the EPA successfully appeal it to the Supreme Court, but unfortunately, the Supreme Court only takes so many cases a year. Who knows if they'll take this one?
Well, I embraced the whole gold bar philosophy. I have one right here. And in this case, it was a gift from Big Whiskey. Yes. And so here's to Gold Bar whiskey and barrel aged carbon.
That's great.
Yeah, I was hoping you would bring up that Stacey Abrams thing. I mean, it's not a close call how much corruption and grift and thievery really is going on with this EPA grant program, because Stacey Abrams' outfit, we covered that extensively on this program several episodes back, but I believe its mission was to provide Energy Star appliances for poor rural residents of Georgia and other places in the South. And yeah, they had a couple $100 in their bank account as an NGO, and then the following year they got a $2 billion grant from the government. There is no way that is legitimate. And what's so frustrating, Jason, and everyone in the audience too, is that this is so rampant, it's so shameless, and they have no shame about it at all, because they've always gotten away with this. This is not a new thing. This has been going on for a very, very long time. And I guarantee you there were a lot of gold bars being thrown off the Titanic right before the first Trump administration, but people didn't notice it and it wasn't reported. And Lee Zeldin spoke at our climate conference, the whole thing off back in April, and he talked about this a lot. And if that $20 billion that he clawed back cannot be kept by the taxpayers, I mean, I don't know what you do about that. It's obvious. It's just so infuriating and triggers me that this is obvious thievery. This is obviously not legitimate. And oh well. All right, maybe you get them next time. That's not good enough.
Let's be clear. There were instances. There are groups. There are mainstream, or not mainstream. They're radical, but they're considered mainstream environmental groups that are enormous, right? The World Wildlife Fund for Nature, the Sierra Club, Natural Resources Defense Council, hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe more in their funds. If that money had gone to them, I still would have objected. But at least you could say, well, they have accounting mechanisms in place. But someone who has an office in their bedroom with no staff and got $2,000 last year, and then suddenly gets $200 million. I just fundamentally don't believe that they will or can properly account.
No, of course not.
How that money is spent.
It's show me the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's those groups today jumping around like, show me the money. They're just jumping around and calling all their friends and telling them they start back up on Monday and the money's coming in. I hope the banks aren't offering them any credit on those terms that the money's coming in, because I just hope that the Trump administration and those in charge of cutting those checks don't cut those checks and continue to fight this. It's just that the American public is going to get incredibly frustrated. We're going to get wiped out in the midterms because people just won't show up and vote. They're like, well, they're going to just hand out my money. They're going to print money. It's going to make my money worth less. And people are just going to continue to be disenfranchised and frustrated with the process. And you'll see participation decrease significantly.
Yeah. Scarily enough, that video reminded me that that's what Anthony does when we have a CR. He says, show me the data, and he dances around.
That is exactly what Anthony does all the time. All right, actually, I want to move on to our next item, because our next item here, this is all kind of related, and so I titled this "Follow the Foreign Money" because this also broke this week. This comes from Fox News. Watchdog unleashes database to expose loopholes as $5 billion in foreign cash floods U.S. nonprofits. And that includes a lot of environmental nonprofits. So let me read some of this for you. Americans for Public Trust, a government transparency advocacy group, is releasing a new database that tracks more than $5 billion in foreign spending, bankrolling politically active nonprofits in the United States. The tool, the first of its kind, aims to provide a searchable database that catalogs 523 groups and 12,090 records of foreign contributions to U.S.-based nonprofit organizations. The database also reinforces the cautionary warnings from some lawmakers that those contributions are having an outsized influence on American discourse. At a hearing on the matter earlier this year, House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Jason Smith, Republican of Missouri, blasted the privileges that nonprofits enjoy that he believes are being abused. Quote, "It's clear the status quo is unacceptable. Tax-exempt status is a privilege, not a right. It exists to support legitimate charitable and educational work that strengthens our communities, not to serve as a cover for foreign propaganda, election interference, or activities that undermine our national interest. Fox News Digital is not aware of evidence that the Department of Justice is investigating or considering charges against groups in the database with any criminal behavior. But Caitlin Sutherland, Executive Director for Americans for Public Trust, thinks maybe that should change and that the law itself should change. Quote, "That's exactly the problem. It should be illegal for foreign influence to permeate our political system, and right now it's not. Our database is designed to give them the information they need to address these loopholes and to close them once and for all," unquote. Now, before we continue here, full disclosure, the Heartland Institute, as I've mentioned many times, and we're all employees of them except Jason, and this program, we've been around for more than 4 decades. We've never taken a single cent of foreign money. In fact, we've never taken a single cent of government money, like the NGOs we talked about with the gold bars and all of that. We cannot say the same, of course, about some of the nonprofits on the other side of the climate debate. And I went through the a little bit in the Americans for Public Trust database. You can go to followforeignmoney.org. And here are some of the foreign contributions to some left-leaning environmental groups. Fund for a Better Future, $103 million in the last 10 years from the Burger Action Fund in Switzerland. League of Conservation Voters, $28 million in the last decade from the Burger Action Fund in Switzerland. The 1630 Fund, $305 million since 2014 from the Burger Action Fund in Switzerland. And they also actually funnel some of that money to the League of Conservation Voters itself. 350.org, your favorite organization, Anthony. $10.5 million from the KR Foundation in Denmark, the Oak Foundation in Switzerland, and the Quadrature Climate Foundation in the United Kingdom over the last 10 years or so. Climate Lead, never heard of it. But they got $8.8 million from the Children's Investment Fund Foundation in the UK. C40 Cities, some of you listeners and viewers know what that is. $63 million from the Children's Investment Fund Foundation in the UK since 2014, and $12 million from the Clean Air Fund in the UK since 2019. The Environmental Defense Fund, they get plenty of money from the United States, but they also got $48.4 million from something called NORAD, also the Children's Investment Fund Foundation and the Clean Air Fund in the UK. And then finally, Earth Justice got $3.2 million from various Swiss foundations. Anthony, I want to start with you. You might need to pour another drink. Heartland is constantly attacked for supposedly taking money from big oil, which we do not do. And these U.S.-based outfits are not only way better funded than the Heartland Institute or the American Energy Institute from Jason Isaac, but by enormous amounts, with even just domestic donations. And now they're pulling in money from wealthy foreign foundations. All the money, as we say all the time, is on the left and with climate alarmism and not with climate realism.
Yeah, well, my first impression is we're in the wrong business. No, not really. We're in the business of truth here. And unfortunately, when organizations like ours say the truth, speak the truth, publish the truth, it's going to be attacked because grift hates truth. It's all over the place. And I think it was Ben Franklin way back after the Continental Congress. He came out and some lady asked him, "So, sir, what kind of a government do we have?" And he answered, "A republic, ma'am, if we can keep it." And that kind of boils down to what we're seeing today. We're seeing all kinds of foreign money being thrown in to poison our situations in the United States, our economy, our healthcare system. They want to take down the United States from outside and do it by influence. I think it was Khrushchev that says, "I don't need to fire a single shot to take over your country." And that's what communism is trying to do. We're seeing it in elections now. We're seeing socialists that are, just simple communists are winning elections because they're spewing lies, and the lies are attractive. And so we end up talking truth all the time. And I want to share something with everyone because this has stuck with me a long, long time. When I first joined the Heartland Institute in 2018, I came to Chicago and they gave me a temporary office to work out of. On the wall was a little plaque, and it was from the original founder, Joe Bast. And it says, "Never, ever lie." That's rule number one. And the Heartland Institute is that, it personifies that today. We don't lie, we speak the truth. And all these claims about big oil money is a bunch of crap.
In so much of government, it reminds me, there was an album by a band called Megadeth called "Peace Sells, But Who's Buying?" Well, in so much of government, it's truth sells, but who's buying? And nobody is. Corruption sells, and everybody's in on it. On the left, but even some people on the right. There's stories out this week talking about how Republican grifters are getting in on the green energy scam more and more. They're promoting wind and solar because they're getting the money attached to it. Or their constituents, it says their constituents will benefit. Everyone else gets screwed, but their constituents will benefit. So it's okay to jump on board.
We published some data a few weeks ago at the American Energy Institute, our website, americanenergyinstitute.com, talking about some of the foreign funding coming in opposing critical digital infrastructure. And it was interesting. I got a video yesterday from the Alamo Pachyderm Club where this guy was presenting on the use of artificial intelligence and essentially data centers, was talking about how much the use has gone up, and was just sharing some facts. Well, and this is a paid lunch that you had to get into. Well, there were some paid protesters there, and I'm thinking, oh, the theater arts majors finally are getting employment now, and it's to stand up and scream at these protests. But I'm like, gosh, theater arts major sitting there reading from his iPhone, which was so funny. I'm like, well, rule number one, know your lines. And he's just sitting there reading as he's being escorted out of the room, and some other lady screaming at the top of her lungs. But it was funny to me because I see these protests online through Facebook that are organizing protests for, against critical digital infrastructure being built here in the United States. It's a Humans First organization it seems to be one of the prominent ones that's organizing this bus stop. It's just so funny. It's on Facebook. And it's like they're using data centers to oppose data centers. One of the reasons why I created this pledge and put out there, if you really are opposed to data centers, we'll sign the pledge that you'll stop using all of the things that they provide. I put this on X, and I didn't put any branding on it because I wanted what happened to happen. People stole that. They used it as their own. My wife's actually seen videos from people in Virginia that use this image. And I'm like, yes, that is great. Get people to stop using Instagram and Facebook and online banking and airline travel. I mean, it's all required, and it's getting more efficient thanks to advancements in technology. But Anthony, your favorite group, 350.org, got $7.5 million. The Indivisible is an organization that's been arranging a lot of these protests around the country. Over $7 million in foreign funding that came from one gentleman named Hans-Vorg Wies. So you got these Europeans that are dumping millions of dollars into nonprofits here in the United States to drive up, and they're basically doing the bidding of the Chinese Communist Party to drive fear regarding critical digital infrastructure. And it's working very well.
Yeah.
And I've been telling politicians, people running for office, if you are in a competitive district, if you're within maybe 5 to 10 points, don't even talk about data centers. That's my advice. Fortunately, my wife's in a very safe seat, and she can go out there and talk about it and actually have objective conversations about it and talk about the good and the bad and the opportunities for improvements and have meaningful conversations with people and take a lot of heat at the same time.
It's the same kind of arguments, hypocrisy that's in the whole climate debate when people say we got to get rid of plastics. We got to stop using fossil fuels. As they sit on their plastic box phone, typing things in and their Kindles and their laptops. We can't have plastics. What would that be? What would you be sitting in front of if you didn't have a plastic screen, a plastic box, and the electronics underneath it that were done with fossil fuels? You'd be on a stone tablet with a flint trying to carve something. See how your message gets out then.
Yeah, I mean, we make this point on the show quite often that, you know, the Climate Realism show exists. It's one of a kind of a show. It has no budget. This is just part of the mission of the Heartland Institute, is to communicate climate realism to the world in any way possible, and we think this show is an effective and fun way to do that. But, you know, we're not the Heartland Institute is not, you know, greatly funded by anybody from outside the United States or even the government. You know, the truth is Anthony, you said, you know, rule number one at the Heartland Institute is don't lie, which means tell the truth. And the truth is that the environmental leftist activist groups that have been around for a long time, you know, the Environmental Defense Fund, Sierra Club, Greenpeace, they are swimming in hundreds of millions of dollars in annual budget, in their annual budget. That the Heartland Institute is not. You can look up our 990 forms right now, today. We exist on a budget of around $4 million a year. I don't know what the American Energy Institute's budget is every year, but it's certainly not the size of Greenpeace. And then you add on top of all of that, and by the way, they get a lot of government money. That's why all these NGOs that's why they're flipping out over this stuff. Because for so many of these leftist activist groups, if it was not for your tax dollars being taken out of your pocket and being given to these left-wing activist organizations, many of them working on the climate, they would go out of business because they don't have broad public support. Some of them do, but they have to live on, as we see here, government money and also foreign money. And on top of that, the media takes everything they say as gospel and won't even report on the other side. I want to thank everybody in this audience and everybody who supports the Heartland Institute, because you're really on the side, not just of the underdog, but of the angels, in my opinion.
There's a quote by Albert Einstein that I want to read about truth because it's kind of relevant here. He says, "What is right is not always popular, and what is popular is not always right." And that's the dilemma that we face.
True indeed. All right. Before I get too angry, let's move on to our next item, which is a little bit more fun, I think. And I've titled Muppets Mouth Climate Propaganda, which thank you, Donald Kendall, for producing maybe the greatest thumbnail for this podcast of all time. I'll read the story here. It comes from the New York Times. It says, extreme weather brings fierce winds and gentle hugs to Sesame Street. No place is safe from climate change these days, not even Sesame Street, where sunny days used to sweep the clouds away. We all sing it in our heads now, aren't we? On Monday, a fierce storm tore through the set of the 57-year-old children's show, knocking over lampposts, blowing out windows, and scattering debris around Oscar the Grouch's trash can. The fictional cloudburst, thanks for clarifying, was part of a special episode, quote, Storm on Sesame Street, created to help children make sense of the extreme weather that has become increasingly common across the world as the planet warms. In the show, viewable on Netflix and PBS Kids, Elmo, Big Bird, Bert, Ernie, and Grover, and Snuffleupagus prepare for an incoming storm, then assess the damage after clouds clear. Left unaddressed in the episode was where all this extreme weather is coming from and why it's increasing. There was no mention of climate change, let alone the fossil fuel emissions that are main driver of global warming. Not true. Rocio Galarza, Vice President of U.S. Educational Programs for Sesame Workshop, the nonprofit organization behind the show, said the Sesame Street team was well aware of the overwhelming scientific evidence showing that human activity is dangerously warming the planet. That's from the New York Times. Quote, definitely, that's what the science shows, she said. But the focus of the episode, she said, was on how a child would experience extreme weather. In the episode, as the storm bears down on Sesame Street, Elmo helps his father distribute food and water to neighbors. Snuffleupagus preaches the virtues of hugs. And Bert and Ernie offer shelter to a menagerie of barnyard animals. After the storm, Elmo and the gang survey the wreckage and plan recovery efforts. Quote, the idea is that Elmo is helpful, that Elmo is brave and courageous, and that it's okay to be scared sometimes, Ms. Galarza said. All right, Linnea, sure, I think it's okay for kids to be scared sometimes, even of violent storms, but they should not be scared of climate change, and I think it's pretty evil and mean to make them so.
Right, but this, Sesame Street episode is pretty explicitly not making them afraid of climate change, right? They don't even mention climate change as driving more storms or whatever. So what this is the news is upset, and they're trying to pressure Sesame Street producers to apologize for not making this about climate change, which is really funny to see. The mainstream media is so on their back foot with this stuff and trying to like henpeck Sesame Street is basically what this article is. I think there's nothing wrong whatsoever with having episodes of kids shows where they say, it's okay to be afraid when, there's a big storm and it's scary and, it can damage stuff. So, be careful, and here's how to be safe, and here's how to do cleanup, afterwards and stuff, and don't touch electrical wires when they're sitting in a puddle, that kind of thing. All that stuff is great. And it's not the first time Sesame Street has done it either. I think they did it around when Katrina happened too. I think it's appropriate. My main focus with this article is on the article itself, actually, because like I said, it's henpecking. They're trying to squeeze in. They actually went and emailed the Sesame Street producers to say basically, hey, aren't you aware? We noticed that you didn't talk about climate change in this bad weather episode. Why didn't you talk about climate change in your bad weather episode? Don't you know that climate change is causing bad weather? And Sesame Street is like, sure, yeah. We're PBS. We know. But, we agree with you, but that's not what this episode was about. So buzz off, so it's very funny to see, actually. I didn't think that the Sesame Street episode itself was any kind of propaganda. I think it's fine. What is funny is to see the media being apoplectic about a Sesame Street episode.
I guess I have a question. Was it completely fine? Because I thought the story said that Sesame Street indicated that extreme weather was becoming more common. And if that's the case, that's just false.
Yeah, I think that's just the New York Times' contention.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's very similar to an article that LA Times published in 2024. They're talking about Big Bird having climate anxiety, but they were blasting Sesame Street for, again, not blaming climate change being caused by man. And so it's interesting. You just can't win. Like, they talk about these subjects, and the kids are scared about weather events, but the LA Times 2 years ago and now the New York Times this year blasting Sesame Street for not pushing a radical climate agenda, which maybe they should be applauded for a little bit. It's something they've been talking about, but Of course, the LA Times and New York Times are just going to lie about the increase in severity of strength of storms when the inverse is happening.
If only we had a animated show or comic book character, a superhero that championed the planet and the environment. I don't know. You could call him Captain Planet. If only we had something like that to save our kids.
I don't know.
You
I don't
know-
know if we want Captain. I think they tried to bring Captain Planet back, and they gave up on that effort, I believe.
They did. Jason, I'm hoping that you can put in a section for your high carbon cookbook that shows how to make high carbon cookies, and then you could make those and send them to the producers for Cookie Monster.
I love it. That's great. There's going to be a great dessert section with dark chocolate. So that's good. I like that. We'll have to add that in there. But Sterling, you're right that we do need some sort of animated, and there needs to be bad guys because you've got to have this fear. And so we really should be teaching our kids to fear the kind of people that I noticed a week ago when I was traveling to Portland. And I had a connecting flight through Denver. I was living the high carbon lifestyle. I try to take as many connections as possible. I mean, it really just, I get to learn more. It takes longer to get there. I use more jet fuel. So I look for those flights with more connections. And so I take a flight from Denver to Portland. And I swear I'm in the airport and I feel like I'm in a collage of an Antifa mugshot picture, the people that were going, and this is maybe Sunday or Monday, and I'm thinking, oh, they're flying from Denver to go to Portland to work for the week doing their protest. They'll all be wearing masks in a couple of hours as they get outside and scream and yell outside of an immigration facility. But it was just really just mind-blowing to me. And that's who kids should be scared of, these people that are driving fear and alarmism in their lives regarding several different issues. But that's so maybe Captain Planet or Captain Earth could protect us from the Antifa protesters and unmask them at the end of the episode, kind of similar to the Scooby-Doo episodes where
no offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
Exactly.
Hey, Jason, I think you just sparked an idea for a new superhero, Captain Carbon. And,
there it is.
Halloween's coming up. I know that you and your you shared pictures last year of you and your wife.
Just don't show him in blackface.
Yes, very creative costumes. Like,
yeah, we were the
Halloween's
Carbon
coming up.
King and Carbon Queen, so maybe Captain Carbon this year is our new superhero, and we go around and we unmask Antifa villains and show all the hair products that are made out of petroleum products that are in their hair, because it's they got those red, green, blue, different dyed hairs, shaved heads that I'm sure weren't shaved with scissors. They were shaved with clippers that were plugged into a wall. That were produced by coal-fired electricity, and their tattoos. I don't know what's in tattoo ink, but I know the drills aren't. I guess unless you're in some third world country and getting inked by the old-fashioned hand style, I would imagine they're electric ink tattoos machines. So I just and the piercings. I don't know about that.
I can see the sub, the subheading. Captain Carbon, life's champion.
There we go. Yeah, that's right. There's the hat. Carbon is life.
Yeah.
And I will say, on one of my flights, I think when I flew from Portland to LAX, some guy on my flight saw my hat, and I just there's the looks I was getting in Portland. So many glares. It was just like people were cutting me literally with their eyes. And the guy sitting behind me on one of my flights, he's like, I get it. He's like, and I love it. Decarbonization is the stupidest thing. And he just totally got it. And I was impressed because, I wanted to high five him. But at the same time, there was a bunch of people with shaved hair, different colored.
As far as the superhero's design, to capture the youth, he would totally be steampunk, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And he can hold and just like the Green Lantern has his ring, Captain Carbon can hold a lump of coal.
There it is.
A glowing lump of coal.
And my wife reminds me, guess what diamonds are from?
That's true.
There you go.
True. All right, let's get on to our last item here, and then it'll be Q&A time pretty soon. So if you have questions for Jason or anybody here on the program today, you can go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll get to them. Our last item here is net zero. Is it lost in the UK? So maybe some good news. This comes from the Telegraph in the UK. The headline is, "We've lost the war against climate change. Time to scrap net zero. The lanyard class should have known better than to believe it could re-engineer the world from Whitehall." This comes to us via our friend Mark Morano at Climate Depot, and because I'm too cheap to subscribe to the Telegraph, I'm going to read it from where he said it from, or he grabbed it from. Anyway, the author is Alistair Heath, and he writes, "Climate change is real, but Britain can do almost nothing about it. The war against global warming has been lost, with only grievous collateral damage to show for it. We have crippled British industry, hammered consumers, and pushed the grid to the brink of blackouts, all with no discernible impact on global emissions and the climate. It is time to accept this sobering reality, cut our losses, cease tilting at and building windmills, ditch the disposable con that is net zero, and learn to cope with, and whenever possible, enjoy a warmer, drier, and more volatile Mediterranean climate if that is indeed to be our fate. Hubris has ruined us. A tiny nation accounting for 0.8% of global CO2 emissions from combustible fuels. We were fooled into believing that we could single-handedly lead the way in saving the world, a futile gambit if there ever was one. Britain's re-embrace of collectivism, of energy rationing, our advanced case of suicidal empathy, have achieved little other than putting us at the mercy of China. The communist state accounts for 32.1% of emissions, pumps out 262% more CO2 than it did in the year 2000, and is making the most of net zero in Britain and Europe to bolster its own industry and its grip over crucial commodities. All of our efforts at carbon reduction and those of the European Union have been offset many times over by the increase in Chinese emissions. Britain could return to the Stone Age and cut our GDP to zero, and it would still make only a trivial difference. Net zero represents the pinnacle of arrogance, a case study in the illusion of control, a landmark in human vanity, and, in Britain's case, exposes a ludicrously exaggerated view of her own importance given the UK's negligible economic and environmental footprint in the year 2026. Bravo to you, Alistair Heath. Sterling, I really think this is one of the most sobering pieces in the UK that I've read about net zero. Yeah. Perhaps the tide is turning after all.
Well, the Telegraph is considered, of the papers over there, one of the most conservative. So it's not completely surprising, though, as I wrote, or as I gave a quote about this story from some newspaper articles. I said, "Look, welcome to the party, pal. We've been saying this for a couple of decades now. What's true of Great Britain is true of every other country in Europe. It's true of almost every country on Earth. When you talk about negligible individual country impact on emissions profiles, on atmospheric emissions, on what would happen if they turned out the lights entirely. Honestly, the U.S., we're still, one of the biggest emitters. If we turned out the lights here, it would have no impact, in part because there's just no evidence whatsoever. And by that, I mean, show me the data, not show me the model forecast or the attribution study. Show me the data that says if we cut our emissions tomorrow, it will prevent future temperatures from rising. That data doesn't exist because it wouldn't. If you believe humans are causing dangerous climate change, emissions will continue to rise. China's are rising, India's are rising. Honestly, right now, everybody's rising. So all there's that great chart that we've shown of all the different treaties. Oh, this year, 2015, 2007, every treaty that's been signed, and carbon emissions inexorably rise. So Britain is a non-player. Let's hope that his message reaches the voters during the next parliamentary election to elect a prime minister. I have a recommendation for who to vote for, but I won't give it because that would make us political. But in the end, he's right. It's just a shame that he wasn't saying this and that others over there weren't saying this from the outset. Because what's true now
Was true.
was true from the beginning. It was always a futile effort. And in the old philosophy saying ought implies can, well, if you cannot, then you ought not either. You shouldn't be taking futile, costly efforts that harm your country. And yet that's what they've been doing for 20 years now.
Yeah, Jason, the Sterling, obviously he's right. The Telegraph is one of the conservative outlets there in the UK. And, you're a former state legislator, and we've talked and among ourselves on the right here that deal with climate policy. And we hear a lot from our audience, actually. It's like, you're preaching to the choir as if that's bad and that you need to convince other people that your position is correct. Now, that is true. But there are many politicians on the right, I think both here in the United States and the United Kingdom, that need to hear the truth about net zero and the climate a lot more often, because they get very wobbly and squishy on this stuff when the science really shows that they shouldn't be.
No, you're absolutely right. People need to hear that. That's one of the reasons why my many testimonies in front of Congress and on this tour that I just got done visiting with legislators in both Washington, Oregon, California, and Hawaii, talking about, and I introduce myself and I tell people I'm Jason Isaac and I live a high carbon lifestyle. And I think the rest of the world should too. And that's when it was Jamie Raskin when I introduced myself that way in front of Congress. And he referred to me as the carbon king. I got anointed by a Democrat, so the No Kings protests don't apply to me. But it really kind of triggers people. Like, wait a second, what did he just say? He lives a high carbon lifestyle. And then I just talk about how it's this trace gas in the atmosphere, and it really piques their interest in their critical thinking. But interestingly enough, when I was in Hawaii, I looked up where the CO2 monitor is, and it's on the Mauna Loa, I think is how you pronounce it. This monitor, and I thought, gosh, and I was on Oahu and Honolulu. It's on a different island. I was like, what would it take for me to be able to go and see it while I'm over here? And I realized that it's not accessible because the roads have been damaged by a volcano. And so you have this CO2 monitor that is on an active volcano, and the scientists discount the emissions from the volcano. And it's like, oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me. So we're trusting this CO2 monitor that's on an active volcano to be the one that's just all this alarmism. And there's no talk about the Hunga Tonga eruption that happened, I believe it was 2021 or 2022, that increased our atmospheric concentration of water by 10%. If not more. And so it's like, wait, when's the left going to get behind dehumidifying things? When are they going to get net zero H2O and reduce that greenhouse gas vapor that's a lot more prevalent in the atmosphere and is more heat trapping of a gas called water, also necessary for life on Earth? And so I just try to give people a little bit of information to challenge their critical thinking, to raise their ability to be higher fact finders and not emotional reactionists, to actually put a little bit thinking into it, think harder, if you will, on some of these subjects, and realize that, wow, we're actually doing pretty good here in the United States. And wouldn't it be great if there's other 7 billion people on the planet that don't live in places that have access to clean and safe drinking water, that don't have access to affordable and reliable energy? That's 7 billion people on the planet. If they could get access to that, they would live longer, healthier, more prosperous lives. And that's human flourishing. And so we've got this incredible opportunity in our lifetimes to end poverty. And you do that by getting people access to energy. But man, the left is incredibly Malthusian. They think there's too many of us on the face of the earth. They want to get rid of half of us. They want to pull Thanos and snap the fingers and get rid of those of us that they disagree with. And they think that that's the solution. And that's certainly not the solution to ending poverty on the planet and lifting people out of poverty. Increasing emissions is, and getting other people to live a high carbon lifestyle is. And you can do that responsibly like we've done here. Again, we're leading the world in clean air. And so I think people are starting to realize that that's why more sunlight is making its way to the surface and causing more of an urban heat island effect, because we've reduced pollution so much. And now the left is worried about all these satellites, and Starlink is going to have, put all these chemicals in the stratosphere that's going to be blocking out the sun. I'm like, wait, wasn't that Bill Gates' idea? to put chemicals like these mirrors in the atmosphere to block out the sun? Well, just roll coal without pollution control technology. That's what was happening 50 years ago. It's not, some people claim that's unhealthy for humans. I mean, it's just, there is so much hypocrisy on the left, and forgive me for digressing, but Sterling really got me thinking. You talked about the attribution science, which the national academies came out and endorsed that. I think it was July 16th, and the Trump administration, President Trump came out on July 19th with the statement calling their climate manuals fraudulent and totally discredited, and he ordered a suspension and disbarment review of the national academies. And just today, the national academies is admitting that they are going to review their climate science chapter in their 4th edition of their reference manual on science. The entire manual needs to be reviewed and eliminated because you have people that are plaintiffs, counsels suing energy companies that are not attributed to that information, that are writing these manuals, training judges. And so you got me thinking about attribution science, and you got me thinking about CO2, Sterling. And, those are just some of the things I've been working on over the last couple of weeks. There's
so much triggering going on in this episode. We might as well be talking about guns, for crying out loud. The gun show. Anthony,
Jason.
Yeah. Wait, hold on, Sterling. Anthony, you said in the chat there's something you need to get in here. You're on mute. You're muted, Anthony.
Sorry about that. I'm a mutant. Okay. Anyway, Jason, you are in fact the carbon king, but you were not the carbon dioxide king. And I want to take issue with something that you said. You talked about the observatory on Mauna Loa measuring carbon dioxide, and because it's on a volcano, it's biased. Well, it is not. I looked into this for a long time. I originally thought there might be some issues. I visited that particular observatory on Mauna Loa. I consulted with an independent person who wrote a book about it, Forrest Mims III. He sent me a copy of his book writing about Mauna Loa. And so they are very careful in their measurements to make sure that the wind is blowing in the right direction, so that any vents that might be venting carbon dioxide from the volcano are blowing wind away. And the reason that they put it up there is because at that altitude, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is well mixed, and so they're getting an accurate reading. It is backed up by readings elsewhere in the United States and also abroad. So the readings match within a few within a few tenths of parts per million, excuse me. And so to say that the Mauna Loa Observatory is not accurate is not accurate.
No, and I appreciate that clarification there, because I think there's 12 other observatories on Earth, but I just want people to constantly question, this so-called settled science and have critical thinking. But I think it was interesting that I couldn't get there because the roads were damaged by a volcano. So that was laughable. But anyways, yeah, I appreciate the clarification and correction there.
And I just want to say that I like listening to Jason, because it's nice listening to an optimist. He keeps talking about critical thinking, and he actually, I think, really believes that some of these people he testifies before have the capacity or the open-mindedness to still think critically. I think the Democratic Socialists have shut down that part of their brain permanently. And so despite his best efforts, critical thinking is just not part of their genetic makeup any longer. They have bred that out of the party. So, I say, keep going, Jason, attaboy, but don't temper your expectations.
Oh, they're tempered, and I am a little jaded because I've had the opportunity to serve in the legislature. I did an 8-year sentence and got out. I went broke doing it. But I do have a little bit of optimism on the front that you can affect some people and realize the benefits to mankind when you have access to affordable and reliable energy. But you look at, just as I was flying back from Hawaii, living the high carbon lifestyle, taking a late night flight, I was putting together a letter to send to the U.S. Senate, the Agriculture Committee, because it's my understanding they were going to mark up a bill yesterday in the Senate, the farm bill. And there was a section in there that was added that extended and made permanent the renewable fuel standards and year-round E15 and this less efficient, ethanol going into gasoline, which is less efficient in and of itself and therefore increases emissions. There's these things that were going in the farm bill to make these permanent. We look at average cost of a gallon of gasoline has increased last month 37 cents per gallon because of the renewable fuel standards. So if you want to lower the cost of gasoline, you get rid of government mandates. There's 5 states now, California, Oregon, Washington, New Mexico, and Hawaii, that have or are implementing a low carbon fuel standard. That would reduce the cost of a gallon of gasoline up to 25 cents. So you're talking real numbers at the pump that people are paying, and it's a climate tax. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about this. And so we put together, in the Heartland Institute and Heartland Action signed on to this letter, along with 20, I think it was over 20 organizations, these free market organizations that signed on to this letter to the Senate Committee on Agriculture. The bill is actually voted down 11-12. They didn't take any amendments because the chairman, Senator Boozman from Arkansas, I believe, said that it was outside of the committee's jurisdiction to actually consider amendments. So the renewable fuel standards piece, this permanent piece, was left in the bill. The bill was voted down strictly along party lines. 11 Republicans voted for the bill. 12 Democrats voted against the bill. McConnell's on the committee. He's obviously absent as he's recovering at home. I'm not sure who the 13th Republican member was of the committee, but gosh, I mean, you took Democrats to kill this bill in committee that is full of greenwashing, climate alarmism. It's full of the Green New Scam and a climate tax. So we've got work to do on that front to educate the people on the right that this grift is not necessary, and it's increasing the cost that consumers are paying.
Yeah, indeed. Very good stuff there. You know, earlier, guys, we talked with rage about a Biden EPA operative spending billions of our money before Trump could stop it. And he said it was like throwing gold bars off the Titanic. And he thought he was being so clever and so funny. He was triggering rage in me and anybody who thinks such corruption is wrong. But he was just joking about those gold bars. He didn't actually have gold bars in his hands. But I have some very good news for everybody listening to this program. You can put gold bars in your hands. Thanks to the sponsor of this program, and that sponsor is Advisor Metals. If you're like me, you listen to a lot of conservative shows and watch them on YouTube, and you hear a ton of pitches for buying gold or silver or other precious metals, and there are a ton of companies out there that can provide that for you. But I want you to listen to me and to trust our sponsor of this program, and that is Advisor Metals, and it's because of the man who runs the company, a good man named Ira Bershatsky. Actually, Ira and I were talking earlier this week, at least via text or via email, and he said that historically gold performs best in September and January, when the stock market is usually lower in September and October. And he bases that on the seasonal monthly gold chart that he has been monitoring that goes all the way back to 1971. And so that's the kind of smarts that Ira has and the kind of service you get at Advisor Metals. He doesn't employ those high pressure tactics or deceptive marketing ploys like so many of those other sponsors in big gold. He also doesn't deal in rare coins. Like I said, if you want to throw your gold bars off your imaginary Titanic, those gold bars will be in your hands because they are real and they'll be shipped directly to your home. I also want to mention that Ira is advertising on this program because he is an America First patriot. He is also a climate realist. He does not donate to Democrats. He refuses to work with the proxies of the Chinese Communist Party, and he, like us, abhor the evil machinations of outfits like the World Economic Forum. And that is why we are so proud to have Advisor Metals as a sponsor. So if you want to diversify your investment portfolio and you want to back up your IRA with real physical bullion of precious metals that you can put in your very hands, go to climaterealismshow.com/metals. You can leave your information there, and Ira will make the whole process so very, very easy. Again, that's climaterealismshow.com/metals. And please tell them who sent you, because that helps us and this program while you're helping your financial future. Thank you very much for your attention to this matter. And it is time for Q&A. Take it away, Linnea.
All right. I thought I could wait it out so that I wouldn't be cut off, but every time.
Every time.
Okay. So first I have a nice comment that I wanted to bring up here from a new viewer called Rue in Gumbo. which is a very good tip, always, Rue and Gumbo, who says, just found this channel last week and listened to a few episodes, always looking for info to explain to my daughter, who's been scared to death about climate change in school, that they are lying to her. Well, Mr. Rue, you can go to climateataglance.com. There's also an app for Climate at a Glance that will contain a lot of what we talk about on this show and other places as well, in an at a glance format. So really quick, easy little like data snippets covering hurricanes and tornadoes and heat waves, everything you are worried about when it comes to climate change and extreme weather. Anthony Watts has curated a big old collection of kind of the most common misconceptions about climate change. And
yeah, and I would say if you want to go to Amazon and order a book for your daughter, they're very inexpensive. Just look up Climate at a Glance on Amazon, and you'll find it. And it's very well written. It is designed for an audience that can go all the way down to children as well as adults. So I think you'll really enjoy it, and it's worth a little bit of money that it cost.
It was I helped edit it, and it was written initially to educate young people. It was written for students and teachers originally, so it's very accessible to almost anyone. It's not scientific. It's not written in scientific language.
Yeah, you can also search for Climate at a Glance in either the Apple App Store or Google Chrome, whatever, or Android, whatever kind of phone you have. We have an app that is constantly updated for Climate at a Glance. That's you can have it at your fingertips at any time. So I highly recommend you do that.
We need a carbon at a glance now.
There's a great book out there, and it's a supporter of the American Energy Institute. He published it. It's called dextersadventures.com, and it's like the ABCs of fossil fuels. It's for younger children. If you see me looking around, I usually keep a book in my background just to highlight it, let people know there are materials out there for young children. But I did a hit, and I can't remember. I think maybe it was with the Maria Bartiromo, and they said no books in the background. So I had to kind of clean up my background a little bit and I moved the book, and now I can't find it. But dextersadventures.com, highly recommend it. There's activity sheets that come with it, but it's more for younger children. So great gift for kids and grandkids. Highly encourage people to go check that out.
Yeah, so welcome to the show, Rue. We're glad that you are watching now. And really, I mean, I would love to see what the breakdown is of what our audience is. I think we actually have like a strangely high percentage of Cajuns, people from South Louisiana on this show, or in our audience for this show. So welcome to the crew here. All right, let's go. And he actually has a question, which was, who is funding the anti-data center push? It's the same playbook as anti-fracking, anti-fossil fuels back in the day. Jason, do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, so there's, I think, State Armor, one of our friends, a guy named Michael Lucci, leads that organization. They're publishing a report showing all the Chinese Communist Party funding going into this anti-data center push. But I tell you, I think one of the best comments or post on X that I've seen is from a guy named Steve Everly. And he takes some headlines from 10, 15 years ago and compares them to the anti-data center headlines of today. And it's the exact same alarmist headlines from all the media that we've seen play out there. So, and I've said data centers are getting the anti-nuclear, the anti-coal, the anti-fracking treatment of yesteryear. And it's the same thing. So, and then again, we've got a report published on our website, AmericanEnergyInstitute.com. It's showing the European funding. Again, Hansborg Wyss is dumping millions of dollars into Greenpeace, Sierra Club, Indivisible, and there are a few other British and Swiss billionaires and foundations, these NGOs from other countries that have close ties with the Chinese Communist Party that are funding this movement. So this is certainly not organic. It's anything but. This is just continued paid protest that we've seen over the last really decade of people blocking traffic and blocking cars. Now they're showing up to city councils and screaming and yelling. And quite honestly, they're being very successful. They're forcing city councils. A city that I used to represent in the legislature, San Marcos, has passed a moratorium on data centers. Others are reaping the benefits. A data center, Facebook data center, $1.2 billion facility just went live this week in, I believe, the Waco Temple, Killeen area. And you talk about the burden that is going to relieve of people on property taxes. So there's just some incredible opportunities for this critical digital infrastructure to be built in communities that welcome them, and then others are going to lose out.
China, as it currently stands, we are far and ahead in the AI war. We have 10 times the data centers as China, and China wants to suppress that because they know, unlike green energy, AI is part of the future, just like plastics was in the 60s. And it needs to be done right. You got to be careful of energy use and make sure that they're paying their way and they're not on the side lobbying for energy that doesn't work for the rest of us, that they don't want for themselves. You have to make sure they handle their water. But American cannot afford to lose the AI war because it is defense. It is, if you believe in the knowledge society, it's knowledge. It's the information society. And I don't think we want to go backwards. I don't think we want to lose that race with China. That's why they're spending so much money trying to undermine AI development in the U.S.
Yeah, and you're right. I see a comment about Kevin O'Leary's project in Utah pushing back. This is something that was a 40,000 acre piece of land. And at the most, only 9,000 acres was going to be developed. They were going to leave over 30,000 acres available for natural habitat, wild game, etc. And the initial build out was like 2,000 acres. And it was going to ramp up over years, if not decades, to get to 9,000. So he's actually protecting over 75% of this land that the people are just taking for granted. And they're completely ignoring those facts and just screaming alarm. And so now he's having to back off of his project just because of the incredible amount of opposition. In that state, you had the longest serving Republican lose his primary election over data center issues. So again, if you're running for office and you're in a competitive district, I wouldn't talk about it. That's my advice. But it's really unfortunate. And you're right about the power. There's a lot of talk about on-site power generation. I believe Chevron and Microsoft have partnered in West Texas. Microsoft is bringing back 3 Mile Island. My biggest concern about the companies that are building these data centers when it comes to grid policy is, are they doing power purchase agreements for renewable energy? Because if they are, and they're building on-site generation, that does two things. That forces unreliable renewable energy to be built on the grid that other ratepayers are going to pick up the cost for. But it's also an abandonment of their fiduciary duty because they're paying for power twice. And so shareholders should be irate if these companies are doing power purchase agreements or they're buying renewable energy credits when they're building on-site generation, because it is an abandonment of their fiduciary duty.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. There's a lot that we could say. Maybe we'll have to do kind of a data center mega episode sometime to try and look at what's true and what's false about what people push about it. Because there's a lot of false stuff. There are reasons to be concerned about any big infrastructure project, and you need to ask the right questions when those are going in. But the fear mongering surrounding the data center stuff has reached like hysterics levels. And it is very reminiscent of the fracking hysteria.
I can think of a great guest. His name is, what's that? Donnie Kendall. He would be good on this issue.
Yeah, we know the guy.
If we do have a data center episode, I can stream live from my own co-location facility where I have all my computers stacked up. So that might be fun.
Yeah,
maybe I can even sneak in a barbecue grill, although I might set off the smoke detector.
I think every episode is a data center episode. I mean, they're kind of necessary for what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I've got a question. Chris Martz is in the house, our good friend Chris. And before I get to Chris's question, there was one more thing about reaching young people with, trying to tamp down on climate anxiety. A good friend of ours, Lucy Biggers, does a whole TikTok series on like trying to figure out how to calm your climate anxiety. She gives you the facts on different weather events and stuff, pointing out, hey, it's not as bad as they say it is in the news and stuff. Here are the facts to back it up. So she's on TikTok, and I think she also double posts her videos to X and maybe YouTube Shorts, although I'm not sure I've seen them there. But her name is Lucy Biggers, and you should go find her stuff because it's really good. All right. Here is Chris Martz, who says, curious if Anthony is aware of all the missing, in scare quotes, temperature data that isn't actually missing. This is something John Christie brought to my attention. There are also numerous errors in the digitized data.
Not only am I aware of it, I've actually been to the National Climatic Data Center and seen what goes on in person there. All right, stand by for a technical rant. You have no idea how bad the surface temperature record is. And when I say bad, I mean really bad. There's all kinds of problems with it that I've outlined about, bad sighting and so forth, but that's just a tip of the iceberg for the total story. The National Climatic Data Center gets on NCEI now, gets all of the data in from all the cooperative observer stations around the United States, about 8,000 of them. And it's a system that goes back to 1892 when it was put together for the U.S. Weather Bureau. And it is mostly manual in operation. We have a lot of volunteer observers and some paid observers around the United States where their job is to go out and look at a thermometer that's in a shelter like a Stevenson screen, or look at an electronic thermometer called the MMTS and record the values manually on a piece of paper called a B91 form. And what they do is they mail this form in once a month. Some of them do. Some of them also use a touch-tone phone to enter the data one by one. And so the data is fraught with errors, either by they write it down wrong or they touch-tone phone it in wrong. At the National Climatic Data Center, NCEI, they have a whole basement full of people sitting at computer terminals doing nothing but looking at these paper B91 forms and then typing those in. They're going from written to computer by typing it. Yes, it's that bad. They make mistakes too. And then they have an algorithm. There's always an algorithm involved that goes through the data and decides, well, geez, this 98-degree temperature that was listed on June 15th doesn't quite make sense because stations around it only showed highs of 87. Could be a transcription error. So they flag that. And it doesn't always catch things. Small errors go unresolved. And so what we end up is a big hot mess of data that's manually transcribed either by touch tone or by paper and by people retyping it in from the paper. That goes into the climate database, and then it goes through a whole series of other things. But as they say on television, wait, there's more. There are hundreds upon hundreds of ghost stations out there. Stations that have ceased to exist. The observer passed on, or they decided it's not worth their time to do anymore, or whatever it might be. In some cases, some of those stations disappeared because of me, where I said, this station is so bad, and I put it up on WhatsApp with that I embarrassed the living daylights out of them, and they took it down. University of Arizona at Tucson is one of those, my favorite save on bad stations. Anyway, bottom line is, we end up having this mishmash of badly transcribed data, missing data, ghost data. And when I say ghost data, the National Weather Service, rather NOAA, is more interested in the continuity of the record than the quality of the record. And as a result, stations don't really close. They turn into ghost. And then what they do is they pull all the data from stations surrounding it and interpolate it. And then they put it into the data set for the ghost station and say, oh, well, here's the station that's been closed since 1992, but it's actually got data. They put an error flag on it, an E, that you can find in the data set. But there are hundreds upon hundreds of these things. So we've got not only bad data, we've got false data that is derived from other stations. And the biggest problem is most of the stations are biased. And so what happens when we make the ghost station data, it's biased too. It is really a train wreck.
And it's not, and from the GOES stations, of course, it's not data at all. The E stands for estimated, and what that is it's not even a measurement. It's an estimate, and estimates aren't data. it is. I don't know what you call it. It's just a number, a random number they plugged in, because that's what it is. It's a random number they plugged in. They made it up and they put it in there and they say it's estimated, but it's good enough.
Yeah, it's a real train wreck. It's amazing. But science.
We do what we can.
That scientist She Blinded Me with Science does look a little bit like Anthony Fauci now that you said that did the science thing.
Oh man. All right. I'm gonna jump us off of the science topic for just a second to bring us to Climate Bell's question for Jason, which is, we have enough evidence that climate alarmists are wrong on many fronts. So why not do a preemptive defense and take alarmist groups to task for the maligning and damage that they've done? So give them a little lawfare.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're seeing happen with the congressional investigations into the Environmental Law Institute and their Climate Judiciary Project, this organization that's been tainting over 2,000 judges at 55 different events over the last 7 years. You look at the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Hawaii, who wrote the opinion piece that allowed the case in Hawaii that's suing energy companies to move forward. He recently retired, but he did write the opinion that allowed the case to move forward in Hawaii, where they are suing energy companies, except for the only refinery in the state of Hawaii, Par Hawaii, which was built by Chevron and sold and now is owned by a company called Par Hawaii. It's the only refinery in the state of Hawaii that gives their executive and leadership and ownership team give heavily to Democrats in Hawaii. And so they've paid the bribe. So they're not part of this lawsuit in the state of Hawaii. And that case is advancing, much like the $51 billion case in Multnomah, which is Portland, Oregon, where I was with Antifa friends and alike a couple weeks ago or a week ago. I don't know. All the days are running in together. That case is moving forward. The case in Boulder, Colorado is moving forward, but I'm glad that there are finally some congressional investigations, and I just hope that people are held accountable. These are organizations that have been taking taxpayer dollars and using them, like the National Academies in 2024, $274 million budget. Imagine what we could do with that, Jim. I mean, wouldn't that, we would hire a bunch of people, but 200 million of it came from people that we don't take money from, the government, the taxpayers. So, yes, granted, we take funds as nonprofit contributions from taxpayers, but we're not taking government funds. Well, the National Academies does. Well, it's interesting. The National Academies, $200 million. They took $74 million from groups like Arabella, these dark money organizations that primarily fund left-wing organizations. And this attribution science report they just published on July 16th was funded by Bezos Earth Fund. So these are left-wing organizations that are influencing the so-called science. And I'm just grateful that there's finally, both in the House and the Senate, investigations. And then I hope that they get their comeuppance soon.
Absolutely. All right. Let's see. What do we got here? All right. Jay Wester asks the question of the ages, which is, why is the legacy media so obsessed with climate? Isn't it their job to deliver the news unbiased? Sterling?
Their job is to, you're right, to deliver news. And news is based on observations of the facts of the day, things that are going on actually in the world. If you want to know why they're obsessed with climate, I hesitate to speculate about the psychology of the owners and reporters at these papers, but I'll say this. It's long been known that if it bleeds, it leads. You want to sell papers. You want to sell ad time on radio and TV. And alarming, scary stories do that better than bucolic stories about, the little girl had a balloon and she set up a lemonade stand and she sold lots of lemonade, unless bikers come along and buy it. And then when it's a motorcycle gang, it's like news. So climate alarm sells ad space. It sells ad time because it's scary and people watch with rapt attention. They listen. They may not agree. Polls show they don't agree. They're not getting scared, but for some reason they're fascinated. It's like driving by a car accident and leering at it. You may think it's terrible, but you're still looking. So I think that's why they do it. Also, look, to some extent, over decades, the media is left wing. It's leftist. They're almost a wholly owned subsidiary of the big funding left. They're owned by leftist organizations in some cases explicitly. They work with Democrats much more closely than Republicans. That's who or the topic that's getting them paid. Climate alarm gets them paid. Climate realism, nothing bad, nothing unusual is happening today. Even if it's bad, it's not historically unusual, doesn't sell a lot of papers.
Yeah, and we have someone who knows a little something about the weather and government and stuff here. Stan Goldenberg, who says they do not push climate alarmism because it only gets people, or because it gets people interested. They do it because they're ordered to by the networks to push this agenda. I've heard this firsthand. I believe you. I think it's, for the smaller organizations too. Every once in a while in my local news, like magazines and stuff, they'll have like a climate change article or something, and it always says at the bottom that the article was sponsored specifically by some climate alarmist group or another. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of push from the outside. It's not necessarily within the media organization. Okay, let's see. Nope, go away. All right. Let me pick one. Here's another one for Jason from Mr. Johansson here, who says, Jason, why don't you have a business jet? Preferably an older, more fuel-thirsty one.
You can go to AmericanEnergyInstitute.com and make a tax-deductible contribution. We would love to buy I'd prefer a propeller, like a multiple propeller plane that just takes up a lot of fuel. So please feel free to make a tax-deductible contribution today so that we can have our American Energy Institute education plane where we would travel around and educate policymakers and the general public more frequently than we do today, and be able to reach them in person in remote locations.
Absolutely. All righty. We already answered this question. Let's see. Okay, this is for you, Anthony, from Climate Bell, who says, I remember Forrest Mims as a book writer for electronics when I was a kid. These books were sold at Radio Shack. Is that the same guy?
Absolutely, it is the same man. He's still a prolific writer and an amateur scientist. He is so well respected that the Mauna Loa Observatory gave him full access to the observatory to allow him to write a book about it. He did a fantastic job. He's a personal friend of mine. And yes, the same guy.
Awesome. This is another good science question for you, Anthony. Guffpot asks, is there a northern hemisphere versus a southern hemisphere aspect to well-mixed carbon dioxide? Assuming the Coriolis effect keeps them relatively separated, the zigzag shape suggests so.
Well, the northern hemisphere, that zigzag that you see in the Mauna Loa graph, that is respiration. That is the major greenery in the northern hemisphere, taking in all the carbon dioxide and converting it for photosynthesis. So that's what that zigzag is about. The southern hemisphere has less land mass, less vegetation, and so it's not so prominent.
Very cool. All right. Let's see. Oh, question for you, Jim, from Jason, who says, can people from the United Kingdom buy tickets for the Heartland Institute conference?
Oh, if he's referring to our climate conference, that was in April. We actually frequently have people fly in from overseas to come and attend the conference because it's over at least 2 days, so it's definitely worth the trip. If he's talking about our benefit dinner on September 3rd of this year, Yes, we allow people with current passports from the UK to attend our benefit dinner. So if you want to make a trip to the United States, we'd be more than happy to meet you.
I'm sure Jason can fly you in on his converted P3 Lion multi-prop plane.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll fly over there and get you, pick you up, take you here, take you back over again.
I
You
would
know,
love it. Yep. If
more
the
fuel, the
sponsor
better.
comes through, there we go. We got this.
Just do what the celebrities do and stuff in their jets and just fly to, up and down the California coast just to get a hamburger or whatever at a place that they prefer. That's the carbon lifestyle.
That's the
right
high
there.
carbon.
That's the
Hey,
hard cut.
I would love to live Taylor Swift's high carbon lifestyle. I mean, gosh, it would just be fantastic.
All right. Let's see. This is a good question from Wheelman, although I'm not sure I know the answer to this, and that is, are nuclear power plants in Europe being shut down due to drought? They are in France. I know that they do have to shut down some power plants for nuclear when there is a drought. And the one from this year in France has led to some of them needing to be cycled down. I don't think it's a lot. I could be totally wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's not a lot.
I saw.
But that is an effect because nuclear plants need, depending on the type of plant, they do use like water from the river or something to cool it, that they take in, they use it for cooling, and they put it back in the river. If the water level is too low, that they can't do it. So they'll shut down the plant for that. Yeah.
I saw a news story today that a Romanian nuclear plant is about to shut down because of the low water levels in the Danube, and they're sinking. You talk about environmental impact. They are sinking 4 barges in the river to divert the flow of the river from a side channel to keep it in the Danube to go by their nuclear plant, to keep it online for an additional 6 days. Four barges being loaded with material, holes blown in them to keep the plants on for, I think, 6 additional days.
Incredible.
Wow.
Good news in the U.S. about nuclear. The Trump administration had set a goal by July 4th to have 3 small modular reactor critical plants reach criticality. I thought there's no way this is going to happen by July 4th. I was right, because they didn't have 3 reach criticality by July 4th. They had 4. So once again, I was wrong. But exciting news out of the legislative district that I used to serve in Caldwell County, Texas, just southeast of Austin. A small town called Lockhart is home to an Oklo facility, not a member or affiliate of the American Energy Institute, but I love some of the work that they're doing and happy to brag on the advances that we're seeing in nuclear technology. But they reached criticality, I believe it was last night or the night before, on their facility, again, in Lockhart, Texas, where they will produce medical isotopes for the treatment of cancer. And so I'm really excited about the advances that we're making in nuclear energy here in the United States.
And to Ian's question, why don't they use a heat exchanger and circulate the same water? I think some of them do. I think some of the smaller ones do, but it is not cheap, if you can imagine, to do that. It's a lot cheaper to just yank it from the river and put it back than it is to have an entire separate system. But this is the reason, I say this every single week on this show, this is the reason that, another reason why nuclear is not the magic bullet, the silver bullet for energy problems. Nuclear is a really good resource where it's a good resource. There is no electricity generating source that is ideal and perfect in every location. Nuclear has to be near a source of good water. Even if you use recirculation, it has to be near a water that they can get reasonably. You're not going to put it out in the middle of nowhere that has no water access.
Unless they offer tax credits for direct air capture of H2O, and we build these industrial sized dehumidifiers, which I would love right now in Central Texas because it's really humid.
Yeah, just slap them all in Houston.
I joke, don't get any ideas to any of the elected officials or aspiring elected officials that are watching.
Get on that then. So, but yeah, it's quite difficult. It's the same with geothermal. Geothermal is also location specific. No matter what fancy technology you try to develop, there are still constraints. Nothing is perfect. And so that's why an energy mix is good. The problem when you start talking about, when you start using cringe terms like all of the above, is that when people say all of the above, what they really mean is we're still trying to squeeze wind and solar in there. And wind and solar are mostly, for on-grid use, they are net detriments to the grid rather than positives. So, okay, let's go. Ian McMillan wants to know if anyone has created a regular climate craziness cartoon strip yet. Anthony, don't you have a cartoonist at What's Up With That?
We do. His name is Josh, and he has created multiple cartoons over the years, but he's not made a regular cartoon strip, mainly because not one newspaper in existence would publish it because, it's not going to be supporting the narrative. But if you go to What's Up With That and look up cartoon, or go to cartoonsbyjosh.com.uk, I think it is, Cartoons by Josh, you'll be able to see some of them. He also has a great calendar. He puts that every year.
All right, that's all we have time for. We actually went a few minutes over our normal half hour over. So I'm going to pass this back to Jim. I just looked at the clock and had like a small heart attack, realizing how much we went over. So I'm going to hand the show back to Jim here.
You were on a roll, Linnea, and we always get such great questions from our fantastic people in the chat today. And actually, I want to have a special thank you to the people who watch this show live. Your time is valuable, and the fact that you give us your time to enjoy and hang out with us on the Climate Realism Show on a weekly basis, it means a lot to us. So thank you very much. So I want to thank our guest today, the awesome Jason Isaac. He's the CEO of the American Energy Institute. You can go check him out at his website. Just search for it. I think it's, you can tell, what is
AmericanEnergyInstitute.com. Check us out.
There you go. Yes, but always a lot of fun hanging out with the Carbon King. So thanks so much for being with us today. Thank you to our streaming partners, Junk Science, CFAC, the CO2 Coalition, Climate Depot, What's Up With That, and Heartland UK Europe. Thank you, Silas, our producer today, for putting all this together. And thank you always, Linnea and Sterling and Anthony. And we will talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.
Keep living the high carbon lifestyle.